Thank you everybody for tuning in. As Ray mentioned, Matthew and I are going to be discussing UX thinking and how it can be used to accurately measure value. To start off, we want to think about why marketing exists. It's a big question and there are many answers to it. Yes, marketing does exist to give commodities an identity in the form of branding. And equally, marketing does exist to allow a business to communicate to the world what it can offer them. However, the overarching purpose of marketing is to deliver value. Marketing delivers value to consumers by allowing them to improve their material lives subject to economic restraints. Marketing delivers value to businesses by generating them revenue they wouldn't otherwise have obtained without the marketing team's efforts. Delivering value isn't simply part of a business's mandate. It's imperative to their ability to commercially survive. And as researchers, it's our role to support this business mandate. From a quantitative perspective, this comes in the form of measuring the delivery of value and identifying ways a business can increase the amount of value it delivers. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Maybe, but it's highly complex. Before discussing how to measure value and create value for businesses, let's look at how not to do it. The ESOMAR Global Market Research Report shows that the research industry is valued at around $47 billion US. I'm sure Ray can tell you more information regarding how much of this value is within the specific area of measurement. However, I'm fairly sure that large portions of the money invested in quantitative research are spent on items such as measuring imagery, such as what people think of a brand's image, what message a brand might evoke. Appeal, how much people like a brand using scales. Purchase intent, in a given situation, how likely people are to buy a brand. And recommendation or net promoter score, a person's likelihood to recommend a brand to a friend or family member. Depending on who you're speaking to, each of these measures has importance in different ways. While we don't have time to discuss the pros and cons of each of these measures, none of them is an expression of how much value a consumer believes a brand can offer them. More importantly, these measures, imagery, appeal, purchase intent, and recommendation, don't mean a great deal to the people that matter most, consumers and corporate leaders. The real measure of how much value a brand delivers is how much a person is willing to pay for it. The more value an item is perceived to have, the more someone will be willing to pay for it. Willingness to pay is the signal consumers send to the marketplace, telling brands whether they're delivering enough value for money, more than enough value for money, or too little value for money. What a consumer is willing to pay resides in how much they think an item is worth, how much value it holds, or how much value it has created. So value in its most tangible form is the consumer's willingness to pay. The measurement of value in pounds and pence, dollars and cents allow us to engage with consumers in their own language, but it also gives us the language to communicate to corporate leaders on terms they associate with. Very few business leaders will recognize research which tells them how they can increase a top 2 box score on a specific imagery attribute. However, many will be interested to hear how they can get people to pay more money for their brand. Now, at this point, some of you might be thinking, researchers measure willingness to pay all the time. And to a certain degree, yes, researchers do. The problem is that many of the tried and tested research tools used to measure willingness to pay have significant downfalls. Simply asking people how much they're willing to pay, while easy to ask and simple to analyse, typically generates answers that are lower than what people are in fact willing to pay in reality, often in the hope that consumer opinion will lead to price reductions. Or in some cultures, people provide answers that are higher than they are willing to pay to demonstrate their wealth. We must always remember, consumers are not price makers, they are price takers. Conjoint, historically, the researcher's methodological ace, allows us to understand what people are willing to pay versus take rates. However, the cost and complexity of Conjoint often means that its outputs fail to land within businesses that lack an understanding of its processes and rigour. Van Westendorp's price sensitivity meter, an approach developed to support value-based pricing specifically, suffers from the inaccuracy induced by relying on consumer-led responses and outputs which have the potential to confuse non-researchers. Additionally, all of these methods are problematic in the way that they engage consumers in research. They often generate poor data quality because they are not engaging in the way that they collect data. So, at a glance, we have a serious issue on our hands. Marketing exists to deliver value. Research exists to support marketing achieving this, but we don't offer marketing a tool that can measure value and find ways that marketers can create further value. At the expense of sounding like a pessimist, this creates a much bigger problem for researchers. Our deficiencies in this area mean we are limiting how much value we, as researchers, can deliver to businesses. That is, until now. And the answer to how researchers can better measure and create value comes from an unlikely place. I say unlikely because conjoint was predictably discovered by mathematical psychologist Duncan Lucey and statistician John Tukey in 1964. Equally predictable and rumouredly based on a series of experiments with baked beans and with a background in economics, Peter van Westendorp gave researchers his contribution to value-based pricing in 1976. However, in 2020, it's the fields of user experience and behavioural science that allow us to better understand marketers' ability to deliver value and identify ways they can create it. This combination of behavioural science and user experience may seem, on the surface, a bizarre combination of fields to deploy when better looking to understand value, historically economic construct. But actually, innovation theory tells us that this makes complete sense. The typical models of looking at value have relied on incremental innovations within subjects close to economics. However, the application of recombinant innovation, this is where two ideas from different fields are fused together, often generates the best innovations by using a wider frame of cognitive reference. This is evidenced by Brian Uzi's study of 17.9 million publications in the Web of Science, which showed that atypical subject combinations made for more impactful outcomes. Combining UX and behavioral science does just this.
Having looked at the issues with measuring value, how do we overcome them? The start point is remembering the common pitfall shared by existing methodologies that measure willingness to pay: poor engagement. If we can better engagement in how we measure willingness to pay, surely we get better quality data, not have to use overly sophisticated methods, and therefore reduce the complexity of our outputs. User experience thinking allows us to do this. So, what is user experience, or UX? At its most basic level, UX is the experience a user goes through when interacting with something. For example, the experience of shopping for clothes online. UX is a discipline of design that deals with optimizing this experience as much as possible to remove any friction or frustration a user may feel when interacting typically with a product or service. Taking this thinking and approach to optimizing the UX for customers can equally apply to participants in market research and has a number of benefits. First, quite simply, the more visually engaging the research is, the happier people are going to be. They are more likely to engage with the research, providing better quality data, and are more likely to come back and take part in more research in the future. In the same way that good customer service can lead to repeat purchase, good research experience can lead to more people wanting to take part in more research. Second, the more we can optimize the instructions or onboarding and setup of the research to make it as clear as possible, the easier it is for people to understand what they are expected to do. Minimizing confusion, again, leads to increased data quality. However, simply improving engagement via UX won't improve how we measure value perceptions. Therefore, we also looked at where principles from behavioral science could be used to help obtain answers to willingness to pay questions that better reflect real-world behavior. So, what is behavioral science? Well, behavioral science is simply the study of how and why humans behave the way they do. In understanding this, we can tweak aspects of their environment or the questions we ask in market research to either change behavior or elicit more accurate answers. For example, as we have seen, directly asking people how much they are willing to pay can lead to lowball estimates where people say what they'd like to pay rather than what they actually would pay. We know from behavioral science research that often asking people about other people's behavior can lead to more accurate estimates of their own behavior. This same principle can be applied when trying to accurately understand value. A better indication of what someone will pay for a product is actually what they think someone else would pay. Behavioral science also deals with incentivization and human motivation. By better understanding this, we can better incentivize people to take part in our research. For example, people like to compare their performance with others. It's why apps like Strava have leaderboards allowing people to compare their exercise and personal bests with others. When measuring value or conducting any market research, including an element of competition will motivate people to give their best answers. Taking all of this into account, we have developed a way to measure value in a game show format which allows for significant gains in participant engagement and data quality. That game show is called That's Too Much. That's Too Much works like this. After some screening questions, to begin the game, players are first asked to create an avatar that will represent them throughout That's Too Much. This level of personalization gives the players agency and a sense of ownership over their answers, which is extremely important for engagement. Theoretically, the personal nature of value is important, as the Austrian School of Economics believes that social phenomena result exclusively from an individual's actions and motivations. The school's founder Carl Menger wrote, "Value is therefore nothing inherent in goods, no property of them, but merely the importance that we first attribute to the satisfaction of our needs." Given the Austrian school's belief that individual motivations solely drive social phenomena, value is therefore an individual's perception of how much a product will satisfy them. In this context, the individual nature of value is represented by a digital asset, a personalized avatar. Players are then told how the game will work. These instructions work exactly like most video games. People are shown examples of the screens they are going to see in the game, and each aspect is explained in turn. Typically, surveys rely on written explanations for how certain questions will work, but using UX thinking, we can simplify the instructions and make them far more visual and easier to follow. Players are then shown a series of products with an image, a short description, and a price point. At this stage, players have two options. Click the Show Next Price button and the price will increase, or they can click the That's Too Much button. They are asked to select the That's Too Much button when they think the price shown is the maximum price the previous contestant would have paid for that product. The closer they get, the more points they receive for that product. This mechanic is known as wisdom of the crowd questioning, and as discussed previously, asking people about other people's behavior can lead to more accurate price estimates. Also, the inclusion of a points-based system with a significant incentive for whomever has the highest score ensures people are playing the game as best they can to try and win the incentive. There is also a countdown clock of 10 seconds per price for each product, within which the contestant has to make a choice between Show Next Price and That's Too Much. This time pressure better replicates the buying environment for many products and services, especially fast-moving consumer goods, and prevents over-rationalization of answers. Once this exercise has been completed, they are shown their final scores in relation to everyone else who has completed the game in a leaderboard. Again, the points-based reward system incentivizes accurate answers and keeps players engaged. All these features are informed by UX or behavioral science principles. Measuring value is difficult, but by harnessing the latest thinking in both of these fields, innovative methodologies can be created. So, that covers how to overcome the challenges of measuring value. But what exactly does measuring value give you? The outputs of measuring value in this way are remarkably simple. You get a figure for the average price people are willing to pay for your product or service, and therefore a measure of how much they value it. However, now with an accurate measure of value, we can turn to value creation. How can brands maximize the amount of value their products or services deliver? Well, much like how behavioral science can be utilized to effectively measure value, it can also be used to create value. We wanted to experiment with putting a monetary figure on different behavioral biases to see how much value they can add. We conducted a number of experiments varying the information we included in the That's Too Much product page to see if it affected how much people valued the product or service. First, we looked at sponsorship. We split our sample and showed various sports drinks brands endorsing athletes, teams, or events in a randomized control trial experimental design. This allowed us to determine which sponsorship type drove the most value. We found that sports drinks that endorse individual athletes, as opposed to teams or events, had the highest value perceptions, likely due to the relatability of a person rather than a team or event. We also investigated how online subscription services could increase their perceived value to customers, simply by changing how they communicate their prices, such as either by daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly installments. Again, using a randomized control trial experimental design. Interestingly, we found some significant demographic differences, with older people generally valuing longer pricing periods and younger people valuing shorter pricing periods. Brands can use this methodology to effectively maximize their positioning and communications, such as determining which on-pack messaging delivers the most value to people, and actually put a monetary figure on marketing functions.
So if we follow these steps, we can increase how valuable research can be to a business. And in closing, these steps are: researchers need to remember that they are there to support marketers in their imperative to deliver value. Core to this, over all other measures, is being able to measure what people are willing to pay for a brand. Fusing UX design and behavioural science to better engage and incentivise participants is central to doing this. Measuring willingness to pay can help marketers understand how well they deliver value, but the ultimate goal is to help marketers create value. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to questions.